In this section of the course, we're going to be focused on the fundamentals of security. Now, before we can dive deep into any technical discussions around SQL injections, or password cracking or securing your enterprise systems, by configuring your firewalls, we need to first cover some basics that you simply must understand. Now, as a cybersecurity professional, you're going to find that it is really hard to ensure the security of your networks and systems. Now, this is hard, not just because we have bad actors out there who are trying to hack into our networks and steal our confidential data, but also, it's hard because we have internal threats too. Like our end users who often try to bypass our internal security controls as well. Why? Well, because there's always going to be a friction that exists between the security of the network and the usability or convenience of that network. Now, let me give you a quick example here so you can probably relate to it. Now, at your house, you probably have an internet connection from your cable provider, your phone company, or some third-party internet service provider. Regardless of which one you have, most of these companies send you a single device that contains the modem as well as a router inside of it. That provides wireless access throughout your house, so you can have a Wi-Fi access point there. Now, by default, the internet service provider will give you a preset password that's pretty long and complicated. In most cases, on the front of my device, for example, the company is a sticker that says the name of the wireless network and the password, such as wireless network, ATT142DFE, and a long strong password of 3% 1WT and 92 #SXH. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty long and complicated looking password. Now, most users will simply change this password to something easier to remember, like Magic 2912 or Cupcake number 1 or something like that. Now, while this is great for convenience and usability, it really does decrease the level of security you have, because it's easier for a cyber attacker to crack that password because it is short, and it uses dictionary words inside of it, but that longer, more complex password, which is normally more secure, is actually really difficult to memorize. And this also brings another critical weakness to it, which is the fact that it's printed right on the front of the modem for anybody who walks by to see it and write it down. Now, the truth of the matter is that with security and usability, we're always going to have these two things at odds. Even if you create the most secure system in the world, your end users will try to bypass those restrictions you put in place because it's making their day job much more difficult to complete. So remember, our end users are people, and people want things easy, they want them convenient. But as we give them more convenience, we're usually going to have to loosen up our security posture a little bit, and conversely, if we try to increase security too much, we're going to make things so challenging and so difficult for our users that they're actually going to take away all that convenience level, and they'll try to find ways around what we've done. Now, as a cybersecurity professional, this is a delicate operational balance that we're always dealing with inside of our organizations. Our organizations are having to fight this challenge all the time to be able to support the convenience that our users want while giving them more security. And this is one of the reasons why we continue to have cyber attacks and data breaches to this day. Because as we give them more convenience, we loosen up our security. Now, in 2022, the average major company that had a data breach spent $4.35 million per data breach. That is an amazing and large figure, but the reason it is because we have a security versus convenience trade-off that's happening. And people have chosen the wrong things to trade off. Now, we can make things easier for our users for them to be able to get their work done on a daily basis, but still making sure it's challenging enough that our threat actors can't hack their way into our networks, and that right there is the dream. That's the sweet spot we're trying to obtain. So in this section of the course, we're going to start out by covering the fundamentals of security, and before we do that, we need to cover two important definitions. Now, whenever you're working as a cybersecurity professional, you're going to hear people talk about two key terms. When we're talking about security, we talk about these as information security and information system security. Now, it's important to know the difference, because these are two different terms. Information security is the act of protecting the data and information from unauthorized access, unlawful modification and disruption, disclosure or corruption, and destruction. Simply put, when we talk about information security, we are talking about the data that the systems are holding, not the systems themselves. Now, on the other hand, we have information system security, which is the act of protecting the systems that hold and process our critical data. That can be a computer, a server, a network device, or even your smartphone. Remember, if somebody's talking about protecting the data itself, they are talking about information security. But if they're talking about the devices that hold the data, now, we're talking about information system security. Now, in this section, we're going to be focused on Domain 1 and specifically, Objectives 1.1 and 1.2. Objective 1.1 states that you must be able to compare and contrast various types of security controls, and Objective 1.2 states that you must be able to summarize fundamental security concepts, and this is what I was talking about when I mentioned that they don't always put the objectives in the right order. Because the thing we need to learn first is actually Objective 1.2 before we can cover 1.1. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this section. So as we kick off this section, we're going to start with Objective 1.2. And we'll first start out by covering the CIA triad. Now, the CIA triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And these are the three pillars of security. Confidentiality ensures that information is only accessible to those with the appropriate authorization. For example, if you encrypt sensitive files, to only authorized people can read them and decrypt them. That is confidentiality. Now, integrity is going to ensure that data remains accurate and unaltered unless modification is required. For example, checksums can be used to verify that a file has not been changed or corrupted as it moves along our network during a data transfer. Availability ensures that information resources are accessible and functional when needed by authorized users. So a good example of availability would be your website. When you implement redundancy measures to ensure it remains online and up anytime, regardless of how much traffic it's receiving. So even if you have a period of high traffic, it'll be able to handle that due to your redundancy. And this gives you good availability. Next, we're going to cover the concept of non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means guaranteeing that a specific action or event has taken place and cannot be denied by the parties involved. For example, if I send you an email and I digitally sign it, that's going to ensure that I cannot deny sending you that particular message because my digital signature is attached to it. Now, in the old days, we as cybersecurity professionals always talked about the CIA triad, but in recent years, we have now added two new things to it, an N and an A. And that's non-repudiation and authentication. This essentially makes it a pentagon more so than a triad. Because now, we have CIA-NA, which is 5 letters. And a 5-sided shape is a pentagon. Now, with the introduction of this authentication into CIA-NA, we now move into this area of the AAAs of security, which we call authentication, authorization, and accounting. Now, authentication is the process of verifying the identity of a user or system. For example, when you try to log in to get to your email, your username and password is being checked against a stored version to confirm your identity. Now, once you've been authenticated based on your identity, we then move into authorization, and authorization determines what actions or resources an authenticated user has permissions to perform. For example, in a company database, you as an employee may have the authorization to view records, but you may not be authorized to actually edit them. So you have read permissions, but not write or edit permissions. Now, the third area we have is what's known as accounting. And accounting is the act of tracking your user activities and resource utilization, and typically, we do this for auditing or billing purposes. So when you log into your computer, we're actually logging what you do. All those user activities on the network are being logged to be able to monitor them for unusual or unauthorized behavior, and that would be a good example of accounting. After that, we're going to cover the different security control categories and types. Now, security controls are measures or mechanisms that are put in place to mitigate risks and protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems and their data. These security controls can be grouped into categories like technical, managerial, operational, and physical controls, but we can also discuss the different types of security controls we have, like preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive controls. Then we'll discuss this concept known as zero trust. Now, Zero Trust is a newer security model that operates on the principle that no one, whether inside or outside of your organization, should be trusted by default, and verification is going to be required from everybody who's trying to gain access to your system's resources. Now, in order to achieve Zero Trust, we have to use a control plane and a data plane. The control plane consists of the adaptive identity, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access controls, and secured zones. The data plane, on the other hand, is going to be focused on the subject and system, the policy engine, the policy administrator, and establishing policy enforcement points. So let's get started diving into the fundamentals of security in this section of the course.